All right, everyone. So, one of the original dev team members for Halo Combat Evolved spoke out on the new game, Halo Campaign Evolved. We're reading here from IGN. Microsoft has finally unveiled Halo Campaign Evolved, a remake of the campaign portion of Bungie's beloved Halo Combat Evolved. Halo fans have spent most of the weekend debating the changes Halo Studios has made for this upcoming 2026 shooter, from the addition of Sprint to the more pristine art style. But what do the developers of Halo Combat Evolved itself make of the remake? Jamie Griesmer is one of the key developers behind Halo. He was most involved with designing Halo's famous 30 seconds of fun gameplay loop and took a gameplay loop and designed much of the campaign itself. Now creative director at Highwire Games, 6 Days of Fallujah, Jamie took to Twitter to deliver an early verdict on gameplay footage coming from Microsoft's Halo Campaign Evolved reveal. He did not sound impressed. You aren't supposed to be able to take the Warthog up to steamroll the hunters. Intentionally place rocks in the way so that you had to fight them on foot. When you can't just smash the crates out of the way, it wrecks the encounters. But the worst part, they put trees in the landing area of the Woohoo jump. Lame. So this is coming from an article titled "I Made It Right and They Are Breaking It for No Reason." One of the key members of the original Halo dev team doesn't sound thrilled with Microsoft's Halo campaign evolved. This is from IGN, so you could check out that article on their website. But this is something that I'm going to be following very closely because we now know there's this new Halo game coming out as a remake, and I don't hate the idea of them doing this. You know, I've talked about this with a bunch of different series where you have this thing where you have these old franchises that have lost their way, and so they're being kind of brought back to the beginning where it all started, where things went right, and not where things have now gone wrong. I have no problem with that. If you could do that to find what made those games so great and get the series back on track by doing a remake and then you come out and you deliver on your next one, I have no issue with it. But I think, Jamie here is making a pretty good argument for look, you're making big changes. So we're going to keep reading through and giving our thoughts. But, you know, there is a world in which you're making these changes for whatever reason. And are those the right changes, right? Are you taking away from what the game was? Let's unpack this a bit. Jamie is criticizing a key part of the iconic campaign mission, the silent cartographer, the first encounter with two hunters in the original Halo. This fight is meant to be played with Master Chief on foot. Players soon discovered it was possible to brute force a warthog into the arena, but in Microsoft's remake, players can freely take their warthog up to the hunters and ride roughshod over their hapless victims. I imagine the hunters with their dying breaths gurgling, "No fair." Oh, and the woohoo jump, Jamie explained. There's a ramp that is supposed to have a bunch of jackals at the landing spot. Your gunner would always say "woohoo" when you got airborne. So these are the little things back in the day, right, that games would have that were intentionally put there to give a certain experience. And if you take those out, it really does change, the game. Now, that doesn't mean that because of this, the game is going to stink. But I think it's worth talking about and worth mentioning that, I'm not against some, we see remakes all the time where they improve things that are frustrating or things that maybe weren't great, but we have to make sure that the improvements are improvements. If you're remaking a game, if you're remastering a game, not restoring, like remastering a game, then you want to improve the overall product, not take things that actually were, fun about it and make it worse. It's fair to say Jamie's tweet, viewed 2.3 million times, has sparked a reaction online, with some fans insisting the level layout change ruins the gameplay flow, others saying this change and others like it will make the game more fun. As for Jamie, in a subsequent tweet, he explained that if Microsoft is going to change Halo's crates to be dynamic, then they should have also redesigned the encounters that use them as a permanent cover. He continued, most people forced the Warthog through because of the hunters. The introduction of the hunters was supposed to be intimidating and difficult, but in the light, so you can understand them. Then you meet them in an enclosed dark area and they are even harder. But then you get rockets and vehicles and turn the tables. It's a 3 act play of enemy design and you want to throw it in a blender. Fine, it will go down easier, but it's not going to taste as good. So once again, you could agree or disagree with what he's saying, but he's explaining the design, right? And how the game builds. And I do think that if you make a game too easy, if you take away some of those elements, you're not getting, that's one of the beautiful things about gaming is when you play a game for the first time and you're like, this is such a challenge, this is such a challenge, and then by the end of the game you see how far you've come. You're now beating these same enemies that gave you problems much easier. That's part of gaming. If you just make it a little bit too easy from the jump, you never get that same um you know feeling. And it's like the dance remix of a classic song that skips the intro and the bridge and then just thumps the course over and over. Kind of what I'm saying, right? Jamie later offered a potential explanation for this change. On further analysis, I'm sure it's because the vehicles take damage, and so you're just as likely to destroy the hog as it gets over the rocks. If anything, that makes it worse because none of the vehicle tricks are going to work anymore. Another aspect of Halo Campaign Evolved that Jamie has taken issue with is the addition of an optional infinite sprint button. Sprint seems to be the biggest talking point about Halo Campaign Evolved. While you can choose not to sprint, some are saying using it destroys Halo Combat Evolved's classic considered gameplay pace and thus its sense of wonder. Others say believe it's essential for the fun factor. Jamie doesn't sound like a fan of sprinting in Halo Remake either. In another tweet, he pointed out that the player was able to sprint into the silent protect, cartographer's shaft vignette so fast that it broke the music transition. What is this for? He asked. Then, if the world isn't scaled to sprint, you will be able to trivially skip encounters. So, you know, I think I think there's actually there's a little more here. Actually, okay, we're not done yet. I thought we were done. We're not done yet. Halo Combat Evolves Needler 2 has caused quite the kerfuffle. The iconic Halo weapon shoots deadly needles into an enemy. Then, after a cool sounding charge, they explode. The needler stands out because the ammo, the needles themselves, stick out of the top of the gun, so you can easily see how much ammo you have at any given moment. Still, Microsoft saw fit to add an ammo counter on the needler just in case. This change has drawn some ridicule online, and Jamie is clearly not a fan. By far the most comically unnecessary embellishment in the whole announcement, he said, I'm not sure it isn't intentional satire. Then, but why would you add an ammo counter to a weapon that is an ammo counter in the first place? So, like I said, we have to see. I don't think we could judge any of this. And there is a little more that we're going to read, but I don't think that we could read any of this and say, this is definitely going to be bad or definitely terrible. We have to wait to see the game. But it does give me a little bit of pause and a little bit of concern because what you're talking about here is the bottom line is the Halo series has certainly lost its way, right? What Halo was when I was at my peak playing online multiplayer games, when I was in high school, when I was in middle school, all of those, those years, especially Halo 3, people that didn't live through that time don't understand Halo 3 and how much people loved it, right? And the peak of really, in my view, online gaming was during that time, and Halo 3 was a big part of it. And it all started, right? You don't get Halo 3 without having what Halo Combat Evolved is. And so if you've lost your way and what you're doing now isn't working, and then you go back and say, okay, let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to where this all started and where we actually were beginning to get on the right tracks and you're making these slight changes to the game, it gives you a little bit of cause for concern. It just makes you a little bit nervous to say, man, if they can't even remake the old games, then this series is in some trouble. And like I said, none of these things on their own, to me, sound like something that's going to be game breaking and it's going to stink. But if we get to this, let me be very clear. If this game comes out and it's not good and people aren't happy with it, PlayStation fans aren't happy about it, the hardcore Xbox audience isn't happy about it, that's a problem. This isn't something that could be glossed over. It's not something that could be say, well, they can try again. No, no, no. The Halo series has taken its hits, right? And I understand some people like the new game, but the bottom line is it doesn't have the cultural relevance it had during the Halo 3 days. Halo 3, we had Gears of War, we had Call of Duty, we had Battlefield, and you had your Halo 3, right? Halo 3, a Forge mode, all of that. It was so great, so much fun. Now, this is only a campaign, but the point of this, just like we've talked about with Gears of War Reloaded, the point of this is to just bring back a little hype for the series, right? Get people showing you this is why people fell in love with the series. And when they fall in love with the game, then when you come out with your next one, you could say, look, that's the reason we all fell in love with it, right? And then hopefully you build that and you get back on track. But if this game doesn't do that, if you can't even remake the old ones, you're going to hit an all new low in this series. In response to Jamie's original, now viral tweet on Halo Combat Evolved, one user accused the veteran designer of crying about nostalgia, to which he responded, because I made it right and they are breaking it for no reason. He continued, I think there are dozens of changes, reload speeds, no health packs, falling damage, etc., that make the game slicker, but ultimately less interesting. And this is, of course, this is a point that is, I actually think I agree with both sides of this, right? And not saying that I think he's crying nostalgia, but I think there's a level of, you look at Jamie when he makes this game, right? When he's a key part of this dev team, and he's making it the way that he felt it should have been made. And I think the proof is in the pudding of how many people like the game, right? So clearly he did some things right. And obviously, when they're remaking that game, you don't like to see all of these things you put into your game, right? You're now going to have all these years later your game back on full display, and now they're making all these changes that you didn't have in the original. I understand why that would be frustrating. I understand also how you could come away from that of being a little bit overly critical of things and making a bigger deal out of things than they actually are. So I agree a little bit in that sense. But I also think there is a world in which if you're changing, like this isn't just let's make the gameplay feel better, not as stiff, right? And I haven't actually played Combat Evolved in so long. I can't really, speak to the I can't really speak to all of that. But what I can speak to is if you're going to make actual changes, things like adding a sprint and all of this, it does go ahead and change the game. Now, sometimes that's better. Like when I played the Mafia games, and they had their definitive editions, I never actually played Mafia 1. The only game I played was the Mafia Definitive Edition. And I watched videos on Mafia 1, the actual game, and I said, holy crap, they made this thing a lot, and in my opinion, a lot better, right? In terms of the overall gameplay, right? What you were doing, I felt it was a lot better than watching. And I think if you watch retrospectives on it, I think people agree that for its time, Mafia One was awesome, awesome, awesome. But the definitive edition, I think, did a lot to help it out, make it more playable for a modern era. I'm not against that, but you have to make sure you keep that fun aspect, right? It has to be an improvement. That's what we need here. And I think what Jamie's saying is that there's a lot of changes you could make, but are you ruining what the game actually was, right? Make it so that everything feels smoother and it's an updated engine, but you could still have the no sprint. Now, maybe adding sprint's going to be better for the game, right? There's been times where they added features to these games and they worked, but we can at least have the discussion on, is that something that should happen? After Bungie left Halo behind to develop Destiny, Microsoft, via what was known as 343 Industries, continued the franchise with Halo 4, Halo 5 Guardians, and 2021's Halo Infinite. The internet would suggest that with these games, Microsoft has struggled to recreate the Bungie magic, for want of a better term. Certainly, Bungie's Halos are more fondly remembered than Microsoft's, but why has Microsoft struggled so? Jamie was asked this question, and in his response revealed his thoughts on the idea of remaking Halo and continuing to make new Halo games now, nearly 25 years after Combat Evolved came out. It's not the early 2000s anymore, he said. Halo of its time, maybe more than any other game franchise, so they are constantly trying to either take Halo out of 2001 and modernize it, which breaks it, or take players back to 2001 with nostalgia, which is impossible. So he's kind of talking about basically the argument he's making here, at least from what I can see, is that it's going to be impossible to do this the right way. That's his point. Is Halo is not going to ever get back because you have two sides. You're either trying to modernize it and make it not Halo, or kind of rely on nostalgia. And in that case, it's just not going to stack up, right? Because it's more than you just thinking about a series in the past. You're playing it actively, so you can't pretend. A nostalgia is not enough to drive a successful game like Halo, right? That's just not going to be it, as we've seen, because there's enough kind of nods to nostalgia in all of the new Halos, right? I mean, you still have those things that will bring you back, but they're just not good enough. Now, I will say I disagree a little bit because, and here's why. I think this was an argument that was being made about Call of Duty. This was an argument that was being made with Battlefield. This is why everybody was pushing for the BRs in Call of Duty and now the BR that's coming out in Battlefield, because they said, well, people just don't like that kind of online game. Now, that was a talking point we listened to for quite some time until these betas, right? Until the Battlefield beta, and everyone was like, I love this game. Until the Black Ops 7 beta, where initially there was no hype behind it until they made a big matchmaking change. And then everybody went, oh, this is kind of the Call of Duty I remember. And this is the Call of Duty I want to play. So I just don't know if I buy into the idea of you just can't remake these games because people don't really want this style of game anymore. I just don't know if that's the case. I think it's more about not having the attention to detail and the love of the game that there once was. And I'm not saying that, everybody that's making it doesn't love the game. I I just think that there's like, especially you see this with Call of Duty, where you just don't have enough of people that understand what makes that game so great, right? The people that are doing it are going off of things that just don't, it's not what the fan base wants. It's like well, let's add all these, skins and microtransactions. And I understand that's more of a money thing, and it might not even be the actual developers working on the game. That could also be the case too. And it's probably more of that is the case. But it's just understanding, right? It's crazy to me that with Call of Duty, you make one matchmaking change, and the entire fan base is now like, "Hey, we're back." They're longing for it. They want that game. They just want it done right. And so I don't know if I 100% agree with him on you can't ever kind of bring it back because it's either nostalgia or modernizing it breaks it. I just think you have to be able to figure out how can you do both? How can you mesh those two together? And I think there is a path, and hopefully there is. Here's another thing. Do you think Halo with the classic style movement being no sprint would still do well in today's market? I feel like it would, and that is when Halo was at its strongest. Now the multiplayer experiences we've had with 4 and on can't hold a population whatsoever. Probably not, but I'm not sure what the point of a remake anyways. Nostalgia, a new generation of fans occupying an enormous art team while you figure out what to do. That was his response. Then someone else asked, "Is there anything you do like about this announcement?" They kept the music and the AI the same. It looks like I'm glad I could still play it on a Sony. I'm glad I can play it on a Sony system. So look, I think there's a little bit more, but we're gonna stop it there. So I thought this was good insight, right? I'm not sure whose insight matters more than somebody who was on the original dev team. I just don't think there's anybody that whose opinion on this would matter more. And I think it highlights what's at stake with this game. I know it might not maybe seem like it, but because I hear all the time, people in the comments, you watch YouTube videos, you see on social media, the same kind of thing of some people don't like these remakes. They feel it as another cash grab, and I understand that. I mean, I'm not saying I don't understand it. My view is, look, I love these old games. I think that these remakes or remasters, whatever they end up calling them, I think they usually do a pretty good job of actually fine tuning the game a little bit and making it even more playable for today's audience. Like I said, with the Mafia Definitive Edition, it's like the bottom line is if I played that original Mafia game, having no nostalgic tie to it because I never played it back in the day, it may be like, oh, this is a fun game, but it just doesn't control as smoothly as a modern game. Whereas now I could play it in the modern day with all of the good stuff and also have it a little bit, improved because every game can use some improvement. And the same could be said for the campaign evolved here. The scary part of this is that, as Jamie's pointing out, is that they're doing a little bit more than fine tuning it, though. And look, adding sprint doesn't mean it's the end of the world. But once again, if, as he's kind of predicting here, if that breaks the feel of the game, well, then you shouldn't have added it, right? You could make the game feel smoother without adding in sprint. You don't need to change what was a really cool part of the game with the needler, right? I mean, and I'm trying to look at the image that they have here for it. I mean, I guess there is an ammo count, and you could still see the needler itself. It still has it, but look, I do understand, right? I do understand a little bit of that frustration. And if they do make those changes, they have to be the right changes because you're taking something that this game, Halo Combat Evolved, spawned one of the greatest series in the history of video games, and certainly for the Xbox 360, right? What I mean, I think this. I don't even know, was Halo Combat Evolved was it on? I think this was before 360, if I'm correct, right? Yeah, this is a 2001 game, so way before the 360. That's what I thought. This is on the original Xbox, and this ended up spawning a series that would go on to have. And I'm bringing up Call of Duty, or Call of Duty Halo 3, because that to me was the big one. I mean, that was a game that just everybody was like, one of the best games of all time, right? It had so much. I go back to that Forge mode and just think about it all the time. The stuff we could do in Forge mode on a 360 console is insane. I mean, it truly is insane, the stuff you could do in Forge mode. So I, man, I hope they don't mess this up. I really, really, really hope they don't mess this up. So thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.